Okay. I don't know if I've got the camera. I managed to knock the camera earlier, and I'm not entirely sure I've got it set up right. I keep getting the feeling that I'm leaning over on screen, which is a bit strange. But anyway, so if it looks a bit odd, forgive me for that one. So feet down. Let's have your hips settle into the chair, about a third of your weight forward. Remember, you're not stuck in this forward position, but it can be quite useful to just have an idea that this is what an aspiration, shall we call it. When we do the first exercise, the tapping exercise, one impression I'm starting to get from this, have you ever hit a drum, like a congo or something like that, and you hit the drum and your hands are actually quite soft, and you hit it a certain way, and you get a certain vibration, a certain resonance. That's the kind of feeling that you're looking for, particularly when you come to the big muscles of the arms and the back of the neck and so on and so forth. So just rubbing your hands together. A light but rapid movement over your face, the pads of your fingers. Over your head and neck. And the shoulder. So this is really where you feel kind of shaking almost through the muscle. And it's really just to give you an impression of how the tissue, and well, not just the tissue, but how your body can feel. Your belly. And your legs. Okay. Settle back in the chair. So that drum-like quality is another thing that might be useful to you when we're trying to develop this quality of this tone within the body, or sung or song. The character for song is represented by, as most things well, all things in the Chinese language are, by so a series of pictures, I suppose you could call them by our standards. One component is a tall tree, like a pine tree. Another, though, is hair hanging down, and it's the combination of those sort of qualities that we're looking for. And again, these are things that we aspire to bring into all of the movements. Song itself has many different aspects to it, and again, like a lot of words in all languages, really, if you're looking at an English dictionary, for most words, you'll see more than one possible meaning, and it can change slightly according to the context. Relax is certainly a part of it that we may feel when we're sitting back like this. But it's not really applicable when we come to the upright position. But there are things that we can feel when we're relaxed, like, for instance, our weight dropping back more, like a release of tightness in the front of the body, which may have an impact on our breathing, that we want to try and reproduce in the upright stances. So give yourself a few moments in this position. As always, all of these things, when we start to work with them, we start to try and bring these qualities into our bodies. Also, are working with this training of our attention to anchor itself more effectively in our body. So both body and mind are involved and will benefit from these ideas. So now coming back to the upright position. And if you want to be further back, that's fine. Look after your back. You might want a bit of support for the lower part of your back in particular. As always, if after 10 minutes sitting here I feel as though my back is getting a bit stiff, I will sit back. I'm not prepared to sort of like strain and so on. The forward position does give us a greater sense of awareness of the support from our feet. But it's the support that we get from feet, legs, hips, from the chair, that actually begins that process of developing that quality of song. Like going back to the idea of the drum, the skin of the drum is laid across a framework. And as we begin to lose some of the tightness, some of the stiffness in, say, our back and our shoulders, our weight sinking down, so less need to carry the weight of our back, of our body on our shoulders, then we start to get glimpses of this feeling, and we start to get a sense that there is something within the body that is supporting us. You can think one way of thinking of that initially might be to think of the skeleton and the associated muscles and sinews, for instance. There's other ways of looking at it. Remember that no one way of describing these things or imagining these things, no one image is ever going to encapsulate the whole of the feel of the movements. Try and find a position where the weight of your head is carried down, or is allowed, not carried down, but flows down through the middle of your body into your hips, and then from there into the chair and to the ground and so on. So you're not constantly having to stiffen up to hold your head up, and begin to slowly turn your head. So we would want to try and reproduce all of this in the standing as well. That's obviously more difficult because with the support of the chair, it's easier to get your weight to drop in some ways. Less easy to feel how your legs can be part of that, though. I say easier is probably the wrong term. It's a good opportunity, I think, in the chair to really feel how that can work in the upper part of your body. We're more likely to be able to release old habits of posture and movement in this situation. Now hands in front of your shoulders and just elbows going back. And another thing about this quality of sung is, and you can feel it here, maybe, and some of the other exercises, as your elbows go back, you're opening the chest as they go forward, you're opening in the upper back. And I can go to here and it's fine. But when I go to here, suddenly I'm losing sung in both chest and upper back. And actually what will happen is here, as long as I don't overdo this, the muscles in the chest will just naturally contract, helping my elbows to come around, likewise in my back. So the rhythm becomes kind of automatic in a way. And then going forwards, it obviously requires an awareness of this feeling and when we're going to be losing it. So again, your awareness, your mind is very much involved in this. And you'll probably find that some movements, it works better than others. Probably find that it's more obvious in some parts of your body than others. Hands down to your sides and out slightly, rotating. But just remember that if there isn't a response that you're looking for, the kind of response you're looking for in one particular movement, one particular part of your body, it would be the same response. And this is where your intent, because you have an idea of what it could feel like, you can actually begin to guide your body, guide your movements into postures and ways of moving that actually begin to enable that. And then winding around. So you might, for instance, find the image of moving through water useful. Or that idea of kind of almost, if you know anything about human anatomy, beneath our actual skin, there's a layer called the fascia that surrounds the organs. A bit more complicated than that, but and relatively recently, the realization has been there that the fascia is actually elastic, and people do talk about this being a key part in Tai Chi. Back the other way. The more we're able to release habits of movement that involve using certain muscles separately, or maybe one or two muscles separately within the body, the more we get the sense of that movement permeating the whole of our body. And then rest. Easing forwards and back. Another relatively recent realization about the fascia is that it has what I describe as semi-crystalline properties. You'll have to talk to somebody who knows a lot more about these things to get an understanding of that. But one of the things that is associated with that is the ability to transmit electrical impulses. And so the idea that maybe nerve impulses or hormonal stuff, there's all sorts of little exchanges always going on in our body, biochemical, bioelectrical, and so on. Heat exchanges, and sometimes described as inflammation from cell to cell, from one part of the body to another. And this has led some people to conjecture that what we call the meridian system in Chinese medicine, Chinese term is jiao. Try not to get stuck on this idea of meridian. They're not vessels in the way that, say, our blood vessels are identifiable, but that system works within the fascial layer. It's only a theory, it's fairly recent, but it's quite an interesting one. So this idea that this movement within the fascia could represent a part, if not the whole story, of this idea of the energy moving through your body. And because it's a continual layer, it's possible to move one part or do something with one part of the fascia, and it could have an effect on quite a different part of the body. As do the acupuncture points, of course. The points that we use in acupuncture and acupressure. There's points in the ankle that can have an effect on the shoulders, so on. Plus, there's a technique called the Bowen technique, which works entirely on the fascial layer. It can be very effective. But again, don't get stuck on that. It's interesting to look at that, but there's other things happening within your body, the muscles and tendons, ligaments, in other connective tissues through the body, the blood, and these all combine to give us this sense of each movement being one movement connecting the whole body. Turning slightly, so your weight going more to one leg than the other. Well, that can be summed up very neatly in this lovely phrase from the Tai Chi writers, that when one part of your body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Turning the other way. That doesn't quite make sense because obviously your feet aren't actively moving. You may feel, as your weight goes forwards, a response in your feet, maybe in that fascial layer or elsewhere, in the big muscle of the base of the sole of the foot. Or you could think that, one way or another, your whole body is engaged in this activity. And then going around in a small circle. back the other way. And this time, to start to make the movement progressively smaller. So it becomes a spiral inwards. And your body will just naturally come to some kind of central point, some kind of point of equilibrium. Just let yourself settle in. And again, once we get a sense for this, it's a quality that we're trying to maintain all the way through. So if you do move as I've just moved, you get to here, you just take a moment to try and recapture that feeling. And then bring your hands to the sides and easing forwards and pushing back. So all of this relates to that quality I've referred to as spaciousness within the body, and indeed the quieting of your attention, the drawing of your attention inwards in the mind as well. And so we have space for that internal movement, filling up the spaces, but not straining against the edges of them. Like blowing into a balloon. When you blow into the balloon gives a little bit. You just feel that little sense of a push back as the material of the balloon is trying to contract. Every time you move in a particular direction, something on the opposite side of the movement is going to approach a point where it might be stiff. So here, for instance, I can go to there. But now if I go to here, my back's tightening up. It's clearly too far. Somewhere between here and here, I crossed a line. And then letting your hands face backwards, fisherman cast a net. The most common place I would have thought places really to experience that lack of song would be initially in our backs and our arms and hands. Be aware that this does imply that there's a, I suppose what you could call a reconditioning of how your body is moving and holding itself. So that would apply particularly to muscles of one type or another. This time, mention the ball behind your arms, drawing your hands over the ball. And then pigeon spreads its wings, again that opening and closing in chest and upper back. On the side, you've still got this this movement of your weight. And that movement of your weight is one of the primary motivating forces, motivating energies that gets translated into various shapes in your, your upper body. This is a game where your intent comes in, and the meeting point, shall we say, between what we could think of as upper and lower body is this area here in the middle of your body. So this is where we begin to focus our attention. Changing this time to pushing wave, and in front of your hips, curving up slightly as you go forwards. And then hands loosely fisted. And turning out. When you do this, you flatten your hands, push them out, and the rotation is all the way down through your arm from the shoulder joint. Turning your hands palm down and easing forwards, drawing your arms around in the circle for polishing the table. One more time. Turning your hands palm up. Gentle press down through feet and hips. And just seeing how that creates a movement, pushing up through your body, expanding and then contracting. The focus for this is in your belly and your lower back. And then turn your hands out, wild goose. Maybe feeling that expansion go a little bit higher up your body. And then parting the clouds, hands crossed in front of your knees. You sit back and you push up. Now letting your hands drop all the way down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So for people who are very familiar with these movements, there's an opportunity to get away from the sort of potential confusion of what comes next and so on and so forth, and to really focus your attention inwards. You know, as I said, no one way of describing what's going on is the whole picture. So you might choose to focus on that idea I talked about with in terms of the fascia. You might just look for a sense in that when one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Lots of things. The image of moving through water is also a good one that can help to cultivate all of these qualities. And then changing, and now both hands together again in front of your body, where your back lengthens, your hips drop back as you do this. we again, particularly as you get more experience, and really try this in those exercises that you feel most comfortable with. But we don't go to the full extent of the movement, we know. But I could, if for instance, I go to here, I think, well, I'd quite like to go a bit further. I would start by thinking, what happens when I let my hips relax, and then let my shoulders drop, and so on and so forth. Always trying to preserve that quality of song within the body, but realizing that that feeling of releasing, letting go, is very much a key element in developing song. I could have my hands out here, my shoulders up, and if I let go of my shoulders, oh, now I can extend a little bit further. One foot out, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Imagine somebody sitting behind your chair. They take hold of the back of your belt or the top of your trousers. And as you go forward, they're just gently pulling you back to stop you tumbling out the chair. So that eventually, rather than trying to lift your head to come back, you feel yourself being pulled back into the chair. And grasping the tiger's ears, again, a hollow fist, easing forwards, feel the lengthening in your back again, pulling your arms over. So don't struggle against your own body. And if you meet tension, if you meet an area, if you go to do this and there's that little spot in your back that's tightening up, those are the areas to try and bring that quality of song into. It might just be bringing your awareness to that part of the body is enough. Might need to do more than that. Changing over now. You might need to think about your posture, about how you're doing the movement. You might want to use an image like this one that I've often used with the image of water flowing over a rock in a riverbed, gradually wearing the rock away. All sorts of things. You could think of a deliberate releasing there when you find a part of the move that really accommodates that. Again, hands loosely fisted, grasping the tiger's ears. Good, and then bringing your feet in. So whichever direction we're moving in, say our shoulders or our arms are moving in, there's always going to be the counteracting movement, the movement that makes us realize that if we go any further, we're going to be creating tension, tightness within the body. And so, there's a dialogue between the extension and the contraction stage in each movement that we do. And then bring your weight back into your right hip. Hold the ball with your right hand on top, your left hand underneath. You're going to send your weight forwards to your left foot. You feel your body turning as you do. This is part of the wild horse's mane. Just feeling here that opening, that quality of the extended song, coming back, contracting, and move across. And on the other side, weight in your right hip and your left hip back into your right hip and move across. And from left hip to right foot, back to the left hip and move across. One more on each side. And rest. And once again, doing the tapping exercises, there's many different reasons for doing this. One of them is just to really loosen you up, get the blood flowing, raise your heartbeat a little bit before we go to the standing. That's important. But that is actually helped by this drum-like quality. Onto one shoulder, your arm, the other side. Upper part of the chest. Your belly. And finally your legs. Pushing your heels up. So it gives them this sort of pumping action. And again, although this is a very straightforward exercise, but there's no harm in thinking, well, I'm going to try and do this with that quality of sung. And then circling around. And back the other way. Okay, good. And then standing. So when we think about sung, it's the quality that allows for that sense of connection, the sense, again, when one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion, to feel that the movement permeates everything. If you think about something like a sponge that you might have in a bathroom or a kitchen, if you've left it around for a while, it's gone all hard and dry, and you put it under a tap, to begin with, the water splashes off it. But as it softens up, so the water soaks through more. So it really is a very fundamental quality. So have your feet parallel and begin to just move your weight forwards and backwards. Now, if you go too far, then that's going to happen. Your body will stiffen up and you'll lose some. So we don't want to go too far. We also want to make sure when we do this, if I show you this, if I put my hole there, roughly speaking, you can see there's a line from my ankle to my hip to my shoulder. When I go forwards, I try to maintain that line. I don't want to do this or this. So it's the whole body moving from from my ankles. Just bear in mind, when we talk about a straight line, they're imaginary. It's straight, give or take a few little curves. But the point is that that alignment is maintained as I go forwards and backwards. And I begin to feel different parts of the body extending and contracting. So if I go to here, I'm fine. If I go any further, that I'm focusing on at the moment is my calf muscles. It might be somewhere different for you, but now I can feel the gripping. So I've gone too far. Then when I go back, same thing with my thigh muscles. Again, you might feel it different somewhere. And so there, I moderate the movement. I let my body move from side to side, from forward to backward rather, sorry. And I allow, say for instance, I get to here, rather than straining against my calf muscles, I just allow them to contract, and that helps to bring me back. You'll feel it in other parts of the body as well, but this is just, and then you could either just come to a halt where you feel that equal on both sides, or you can take that a little bit further. Not quite so easy, the same idea, just tilting gently from side to side, and you feel, I feel it here and here, as always. And what we can do now is combine those movements so that I'm actually going around in a circle. We did this in the chair. The same idea, you do a few turns, a few rounds in one direction. Try and stay soft in your knees as you do this. You go the other way, and then you start to let the movement spiral inwards. So again, we come to the standing posture when we've got that sense of what in Tai Chi I often refer to as central equilibrium. So this idea of central equilibrium and sung really are, in a way, two different ways of labeling the same feeling. And again, don't get too stuck on the labels. when I start to sink back, I'm trying to maintain those qualities as much as I can. And I allow the body to make adjustments that are conducive to that. If I hold my back tight and I pull my belly in, I fall backwards. I tense up, because actually this locks the pelvis. And one of the adjustments I want my body to make is for the pelvis to adjust. And our bodies are generally very good at doing that. So don't start with what used to happen a lot in Tai Chi. There are lines in the Tai Chi writings and instructions that say, tuck the pelvis under. In fact, a better way of interpreting those phrases is to say that the pelvis tucks under. In other words, we don't have to tuck it under, it does it itself. And the problem is, if I think here, right, I've got to tuck my pelvis under, I'll probably do that. Whereas in fact, it's a much more subtle movement. A very natural movement for our body, because when we walk along the pavement and there's a little slope or a dip or something like that, then these movements in the pelvis help to keep us stable. So it's a good practice. It's a good exercise to really encourage those qualities, those movements. Bring your hands around so you're cradling the ball and pushing up and sinking down. And then wild goose. And heart in the clouds. So that feeling of sung, that feeling of central equilibrium becomes one of the sort of benchmarks that we're trying to maintain. Okay, and shake out. Put one foot forwards and transferring your weight from one foot to another. Those little changes in the pelvis are very fine motor movements. And they're movements that easily get lost as we get older. They involve certain muscles, certain nerve aspects of the nervous system. And it's very much that area is subject to this thing about use it or lose it. So they can get lost, but if we keep using them, our body will maintain them. So as I go forwards and backwards, chances are I do go slightly out of line. And so there's that adjustment there. And I like to stop sometimes, just give myself a chance to really feel this, to give my body the chance to make those adjustments. Again, I would emphasize, we're not doing this deliberately. We're bringing them into our awareness and into our intent, but I'm not sort of thinking, well, I need to do this with the pelvis. So I'm observing what is going on. You can, if you wish, don't do this right now. But if, for instance, I get this cushion, and so now one one foot is slightly higher. I was just, if you do this, do it next to a wall. So I go forward. It doesn't feel quite the same. I'm like, oh, I'm here. But again, I can find that. And okay, it will probably throw my upper body posture off a bit. I don't know if it is. It seems okay actually. But actually, this could represent that paving slab that's a little bit higher, or that little slope from somebody's gate to the road that they drive their car in on. The little things that can easily make you just lose a little bit of stability. That's right. This way as well. I've never done it like this before, actually. So there's, yeah, that's quite interesting. And obviously be careful if you do this, but it's a way of just investigating this and a way of understanding that if we hold that quality of sung in our attention, and if we practice sort of thinking about that while we're doing Tai Chi, then it becomes an integral part of how we move. And so when we're walking along without us even having to think consciously about it, it's become a habitual way of moving. We often notice that people who do a certain type of activity often move very similarly. People who ride horses or play tennis or something like that, they have a certain physique. Well, the physique, if you like to think of it like that in Tai Chi, is defined in a way through this quality of sung, through this idea of central equilibrium. And you can begin to raise your toes and your heel. And it's adaptable. This is the thing, we learn it in the chair, on a flat surface, and so on and so forth. But Tai Chi is a very adaptable art. It's an art, it's originally a martial art. So built into the system, if you like, is this idea that whatever we find in the practice has the capability of being taken into our daily lives in one way or another. Because Sung isn't saying this is where your knee should be, this is where your hip should be always. It's saying this is the feeling that you want, this is your intent. And therefore, we will practice in a way that helps you to fulfill that intent. And stepping in. So this is an ongoing process in Tai Chi. This is not a kind of, oh, I do this and everything will be fine. This is part of how we practice. I quite like it when I go outside and I train and the lawn's a little bit uneven, because it means I'm just automatically trying to maintain central equilibrium in an environment which is a little bit more challenging than the one I have here. On the other side, this really is very much a mind-body process. It's that area of mind that is subconscious and unconscious. I don't walk along the road thinking, oh, I've got to stay in sung any more than I would do a series of complicated Tai Chi movements and think, got to be sung, got to be sung. I wouldn't remember anything else. So it becomes hardwired into how we move. Raising the toes and the heel. Stepping in. and then step through. And back the other way. Bring your feet out. Let's just very quickly have 1 foot forwards, and we're going to make this figure of 8 with the stepping, just so you get a little bit of practice of experiencing song in the background rather than the foreground. So everybody in the class has done it. If you're watching and you haven't done this before, just copy as best you can. So if you're watching it on YouTube, weight in your back foot, right foot forwards, turn, come through. Yeah, turn a little bit and bring the foot through, softening the supporting hip, step and come through. Raise your back heel, see a little wobble there, I come back to song. And it's the familiarity with that enables me to come back to it. Just take your time. And then going back. One more. Good. Lovely. Go back to your chairs. One thing to remember, I mean, going back to that exercise and the little wobble I had there, that wasn't deliberate, by the way. There's always these little wobbles. Of course, one of the things that we're hoping for, one of the things that we're looking to do in Tai Chi is to maintain good form all the way through. So that, you know, it's looking smooth and flowing and so on and so forth. If you're walking along the pavement and there's a slight dip like that, then if it looks good, then great. But that's not what's important, is it, at that point? You know, what's important is that you don't fall over, that your body just does that. And even if it's a bit wobbly and a bit shaky and a bit kind, you know, you have to take a quick step or something like that, it's great because you haven't fallen over. And I think, you know, you see that very much when we look at the martial side of it, that the more pressure you use in the martial side of it, the less pretty it looks. Martial arts can look absolutely lovely, and you can see displays, you see people moving in Tai Chi and other martial arts, and they're moving beautifully and so on and so forth. If it's a fight, or even if they're sparring with somebody, it's not nearly so poetic. But so, you know, and that's not to say that the quality of movement isn't important. I think there's many things about it that are really, really good. But if you do go along the road and have a little trip or something like that, being upright is important. Looking good while you're being upright, if it happens, it's great. But it's not at that moment the primary aim. In those moments where you could slip, you could lose stability and overbalance, the important thing is to come back to that stability, because both Sung and central equilibrium offer us the potential for that stability. So just coming back to sitting however you're comfortable, and then embrace tiger, return to mountain. And this is a good exercise for showing us how we can come back to the really sort of like grounded aspect of song, the central equilibrium. We'd like to maintain it all the way through. Chances are there comes a point where we kind of just, we're beginning to lose it, but we learn to come back, coming back to the melody. And then just rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So sorry we didn't get to do too much of the standing stuff. But I think it's quite interesting.